what I'm going to be trying to cover for the first half an hour is just a bit of background, just to make sure that we're all up on the same page in terms of what are essential goods and services. I'll then start talking about the initial focus that government is trying to put money into the business sector, and specifically into the SME sector. That's obviously where I think the biggest crisis will be. Most small businesses, cash flow dries up really fast if their clients are starting to reduce purchases. Then I'll give you a bit of an intro into the grants and tax support. Just a high level, we will be having a follow-up webinar on Thursday. We will go through in a lot more detail the various tax and grant support that is an offer from the various government institutions. But I will talk about it at a high level. And I'll then close off just with a bit of, I think, recommendation from my side on what I think the way forward is and how you can help and support your clients. Yeah, so from I think a background perspective, I think just to remind everybody that virtually everything that's getting published is in terms of the Disaster Management Act of 2002. So I think it's really important that all of you as advisors in this space make sure you get copies of the fundamental overarching legislation. Because what I found is that virtually every other rule and regulation that's getting published refers back to it in terms of things like essential goods. So I think it's really vital that you make sure you get copies of those notices that came out from the 18th onwards. I think there's about 3 of them, with the last one with amendments published on the 26th of March. I can circulate them through site if you guys wish. Okay, I think the next point is just to make sure that everybody understands what we mean by essential goods and services. That has been specifically stated in the Disaster Management Act. Okay, there is an annexure called Annexure B, which categorizes all goods and services during lockdown. And that's in terms of Regulation 11A. Caroline, who is going to be covering some of the custom stuff in the session a little bit later, will be putting a table up on all those goods, essential goods and services, which is effectively an extract from the Annexure B and its amendments. So we put it together in one place, so you guys can refer to it. But effectively what they've done is, from a goods perspective, they have split it into food, cleaning and hygiene products, medical products, fuel, and basic goods. So those are, I think, really important, just to make sure you understand what's on the list. So that's from a goods perspective. And then also they've categorized services as well, from financial services, things like grocery stores, including spas or shops, that kind of stuff. Those are all essential services, and they have updated that. So I do expect this essential goods and services list to be updated over time, because there have been some challenges with the list. As an example, initially a lot of baby care products were excluded from the list, but in the amendment on the 26th of March, they did add products for care of babies and toddlers, and all the personal toiletries, hair care, body, face washes, deodorants, and toothpaste to the list. Initially, that stuff was left off, so there was quite a bit of panic in business in what was deemed to be essential goods and services. Maybe another point to bear in mind is when they talk about essential goods and services, especially on the goods side, they're talking about the final product, and obviously anything in the supply chain that you need to make those goods. So let's take an example. If you are a paint manufacturer and you're making paint that's going to be put on labels, and those labels are going to go on food, you obviously can't distribute food without labels on it. So effectively, the paint manufacturer in this case is part of the supply chain, so they'll be able to stay open as a essential product linked into the supply chain of food. Okay, and that's obviously where the BizPortal website comes in. So anybody who was supposed to be providing goods and services was meant to go onto the BizPortal website and register their business, and they would have got a certificate on the CIPC letterhead which says you are providing an essential goods and services. So that's on the bizportal.gov.za website. Obviously, the challenge is currently, obviously, our services as tax providers and grant providers are not essential services. That's currently the way it is. So we all have to work from home. There was some initial uncertainty because the initial regulation said all businesses except essential business people providing essential goods and services had to be closed. Okay. But they did amend that in the last amendment on the 26th of March to say all businesses have to be closed except if you can work from home. So if you can run your own business and you advise your business from home, then you are allowed to do so. Okay, so we're not illegal doing this webinar as an example, but we potentially were legal before the 26th of March when the updated regulations were published. So next issue I want to talk about is just obviously the focus of business. So you can see, I think virtually everything that we've seen out from various of the government authorities is to focus on the liquidity of SMEs, especially in the short term. So the big issue is really just liquidity of businesses. So you've seen a lot of the I suppose documents that have been released by what I'd call the government finance institutions, the DFIs, have been focusing on providing liquidity to SMEs in the short term. Also, from a tax perspective, BUSA has put a committee together which is giving recommendations into government. And some international research has been done on what are other countries doing in terms of tax. And virtually, I think the common theme with all governments around the world is they're delaying tax payments, obviously some more than others, but most of them have been more generous than South Africa. So I think what we have seen with the recent announcements is that from a South African perspective, we've only got 20% of the pay as you earn being delayed. There's been an increase in the employment tax incentive by 500 Rand and some changes to the provisional tax payments for 6 months. So I think there is going to be a stronger drive to make those, I suppose, tax incentives, if you want to call them that, or tax deferrals, more generous. So I'll be interested to see where that goes over the next month or so. Also, there has been a big drive to provide exemptions from VAT and customs on essential goods, and that's specifically on imported goods. So there has been a rebate, and Caroline will talk about that a little bit later in more detail. But there is a exemption or a rebate on customs and VAT on imported goods. And I think also as well, I think it's important just to bear in mind that we do expect, I suppose, changes over time. There's obviously a lot of uncertainty there. Even the SARS officials I have seen some of the communications that have come out from the SARS Commissioner and even some of the customs authorities that tend to be behind, because what's practically happening is things are changing, coming out from the Department of Transport or the Disaster Management Act, and obviously all the other government departments are struggling to keep up with the changes. Okay, just moving on to the next slide. Okay, so as I said earlier, the main focus is to improve liquidity in SMEs in the short term. And they've defined SMEs, I think, as the general terminology that we most understand into SMEs. It's companies with turnover below 50 million rand. And I think they've chosen that because that ties in nicely with EMEs and QSEs in terms of the BEE codes, and in terms of the definitions in terms of the Small Business Act. What we have now seen is there's three main forms of support that are coming out from government. One in the form of grants, and when I say grants, I'm talking about support that will not be repaid. Okay. Second one is in the terms of finance with lower interest and also longer repayment terms. Okay. I'm seeing a lot of these questions here. I'll ask some of them as we go along. And then the final part is procurement of essential goods. A lot of this has been driven, because it's SMEs, by the Department of Small Business. And it is recommended that all your clients who are in the small business category need to be registering and applying through that smesa.gov.za website. In terms of the normal Department of Trade and Industry incentives, we are starting to see some rule relaxations, and the reason for that is most government programs have got rules around when you have to submit claims and when you have to get them audited by and all that kind of stuff. And there has to be site inspections, and the reality is some of that stuff just can't happen for the next 21 days. So DTI is starting to issue some rules. We've seen some of them already, an example on the film scheme, but the reality is most of those rule relaxations have not been finalized yet. So a lot of that detail on those incentives will come out on our webinar on Thursday. But maybe just a quick point, maybe just some guidance for you on the call in terms of finance. I would suggest there is, I suppose, three government departments or three areas I would suggest you look at. One is the Department of Small Business. Next, I would, if you've got clients who are 51% black owned, there has been some funding made available by the National Empowerment Fund, the NEF. They put aside 200 million rand. The IDC has put aside 3 billion rand for companies to help them either expand or fast track their fight and obviously making products or making essential goods. Okay, so it's IDC, Department of Small Business, and NEF. Those are the three main DFIs that we are seeing that are providing preferential funding. Obviously, each bank as well. You have seen that there has been some competition relaxations in various sectors. The banking sector is one of them, and that is obviously so the banks can work together and come up with relaxation of the funding rules and repayment mechanisms, obviously at individual banks. Okay, so we have some virtually all banks have published some kind of message on their websites in terms of what funding and what payment holidays they're willing to give up. Okay, I saw some of the questions here around SMEs and sole traders. I think interesting question. I know in some of the tax stuff, they've defined SMEs as less than 50 million rand. I know in the explanatory memorandum, they are saying that they're not 100% sure. They're busy defining sole traders, and I think they're going to be defining it as something less than 5 million rand revenue for sole traders. But those rules are not finalised yet. Okay. Some of the questions I've been seeing was also in terms of VAT. So I don't think there's any relaxation on VAT from what I've seen. A lot of other countries have, but in terms of the National Treasury published guidelines, VAT is payable tomorrow. So guys, please pay it. I know BUSA are calling for some deferrals on VAT. Also, in terms of the tax recommendations, all the recommendations so far are effective from 1 April, which effectively means it won't cover pay-as-you-earn that's due on the 7th of April, because that's for the period for March. Okay. So effectively, your payment on pay-as-you-earn due on the 7th of April must be paid. It's only for tax payments. Effectively, your pay-as-you-earn that will be paid on the 7th of May onwards, where the 20% deferral applies. Okay, I'm trying to see any other questions that I can answer. Okay, on the exemption of import of essential goods, it obviously applies to VAT as well, because the rebate item they're using is in the VAT schedule as well. So the VAT and customs, VAT follows the customs and the rebate item. But Caroline will talk about that a little bit later. Okay, that's just looking at the time. Okay, not sure I saw all the questions. Obviously, they're coming up quite fast. 20% pay-as-you-earn, is it UIF or SDL? Good question. I'm not sure. From all the explanatory memorandum I'm seeing, it seems to refer to pay-as-you-earn in terms of the tax recommendation. I don't know if anybody else can shed any light on that. Okay. The BIS portal, the CK number. I suppose you do need a registration number through CIPC. I know there was some challenges. A lot of companies were struggling to register because it's not just your company registration number. There's you have to go into the CIPC website under company details, and if you're a manufacturer, you'll have a capital M there, and then you drop the last two numbers, and that's your enterprise number from a CIPC perspective, and that's the information that you put on the on that BIS portal website. Okay, yeah, I think so M or K. So I think M is for manufacturers and K I think is for advisory companies and others. Others I think CIPC classifies businesses when they register in terms of manufacturers or others. Okay. Yeah, so the proposal does only refer to pay-as-you-earn liability. That's what I've read. Okay, and that's in the examples specifically refer to pay-as-you-earn. Okay, so you say M is for companies and K is for closed corporations. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah. What do you say? K is registered after 2011. Okay. So obviously each company will have a different capital letter in front. Thanks for that clarity. Okay, B is for closed corporations. Okay, so I think it's just making sure that companies do get that CIPC certificate. I think a lot of the communication is saying it's like voluntary, but I would just recommend that companies do go onto that website, register, get that CIPC certificate. So it just lowers the risk of when that companies know they know they are approved by CIPC. Okay, yeah, no, I think there seems to be a challenge with the sole proprietor on the BIS portal. I'm not sure how to resolve that. Okay, just on the information, I said somebody was saying it's just a bit too quick. A lot of the information around the incentive stuff, there will be a session on Thursday this week. We'll be going through each of the incentive programs, each of the financing programs through NEF, IDC, small business in much more detail. This session was meant just to be an intro into that session. So yeah, please forgive me for not going. We'll have a 2-hour session on that in detail. Okay, and I think Corin's saying there will be an email on the upcoming webinars that will be going out. Okay. Okay, any more questions? So I think maybe anything else I want to talk about. I think the essential good stuff I've spoken about. We will circulate the regulations. Caroline will talk about the table. Just in terms of the tax stuff, I think it was clear that the ETI is going to be increased by 500 Rand a month. And obviously they're trying to accelerate the payments, so that's every month, and they're taking away the age limit for the employment tax incentive. And also if the 24-month rule has also been removed in terms of the employment tax incentive. And that will be for you better monetize that in your pay-as-you-earn payments on the 7th of May. Okay, completing the page, do you deduct the 20% automatically? I would assume so. I haven't seen how they've adjusted the forms yet. Okay, the ETI. So the ETI stuff is so effectively what they're doing is they're increasing the ETI from 1,000 Rand per employee per month to 1,500 Rand. They're taking away the age limits. Remember, the normal age limit for ETI was 18 to 29. They're taking that age limit away, so it effectively applies to all employees with remuneration below the limit of 6,500. So that's good news. And also employees that, because there's a 24-month rule, so if the employee was between 18 and 29, and then for 24 months you got the employment tax incentive. Now going forward, even though you've got it for 24 months, they can come back onto the list and you can get employment tax incentive for the employees that have already had 24 months, or you've had 24 months of employment tax incentive benefit. Okay, what else did I say? The 24-month age rule they've waived. Also, normally employment tax incentive is paid out twice a year, every 6 months, and now you can claim it every month through the pay-as-you-earn system. Okay, will tax compliance? The answer is no. So tax compliance will not be affected by the pay-as-you-earn deferment. They made that clear. Okay. Is the age still relevant? The answer is no. So I think it goes up to 65 now. Okay, so the way they've done it is the rules on the tax changes have been published by National Treasury in a media statement and explanatory notes. And effectively what will happen practically is they will take legal effect from 1st of April, but they'll obviously be put through the tax system in bills later in the year and made retrospective. Okay, so they're on the SARS website and also on the National Treasury website. Okay, do you have to be compliant to claim the tax incentive? My understanding is yes. I think for all these proposals, you have to be, I think, tax compliant. Okay, so I think there's some of the stuff on the let's say here in terms of the employees tax does not apply to any employer or rep that failed to submit any return. So obviously, as I effectively saying, you have to be tax compliant. Okay, anything else? Okay, so when is it claimable? The pay as you earn, it's effective for the payment because it's effective from 1 April. It's for pay as you earn payable on the 7th of May. So it's not the payment due on the 7th of April. Okay, so some of the questions on the tax and grant stuff, we'll cover all the detail on Thursday. There's quite a lot of detail on the various programs. We'll cover in the webinar on Thursday. So you say one of your clients put the 20% on their March payroll. Really? Okay, that's not what the law says. Okay. So effectively, the legislation is clear. It's all 1 April 2020, the proposed amendments. So they say SARS deducted the 20% for the, is that what you're saying? Interesting. Okay, interesting. Okay, so I mean, I think that was just, yeah, my session for the first session was ending now at 3:30. Okay. Okay, so yeah, thanks everybody. I think we now got I think a 5-minute break in terms of the agenda, and then Caroline will be up and take us through all the customs changes, so you can advise your clients on how they're supposed to handle the import and export stuff. Cool. Thanks everybody. Have a good day.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Caroline Reda. Can you all hear me loud and clear? Okay, great. Good. I had a lot of buffering earlier. I was concerned about the internet. So as Dwayne mentioned, I'm going to be talking about what SARS Customs has done around the COVID-19 crisis, how it's responded, and what it means for you and your clients in terms of your customs obligations, and then also how to respond in this time of crisis. Okay, so today we're going to discuss the customs efforts to support the movement of essential goods at this time, then impact on customs processes. So obviously not just clearing goods, but what is, or what we talk about as the back office functions, so the various customs branches and offices, what they will be doing in terms of customs at this time, and how they will operate and what is available to you and what you may need to postpone for later. Then we will also discuss the potential impact on world trade and South Africa. So obviously, just in case there are those, or there will be people on here who don't deal with customs from a day-to-day perspective, we are going to be discussing imports, exports, and the manufacture of goods subject to excise duty and how all of that is going to be impacted at this time. All right, so the efforts to support the movement of essential goods is the first topic. Then, as Dwayne mentioned before, there's now a rebate item for essential goods. This is item 41211, goods imported for the relief of persons in cases of famine or national disaster. There will be no customs duty nor VAT. So historically, there are a number of those products that we have had to pay customs duty on in the past. That may be because there is local manufacture that is being protected, or for other reasons. Now, obviously, we want to keep the prices of those to the consumer low, and we need to make sure that we can all access those products at this time. So there should be no tax on those. This rebate item applies to those essential goods, and something that is required before you can just bring them in free of duty or VAT under that rebate item is an ITAC import permit. This was published on Saturday, so a letter directing everybody to do that was published on Saturday. Something to note is that if companies don't want to apply for the permit, they don't have time, maybe they're already bringing in the goods over the weekend, they will just pay the duty and the VAT. I'm not sure at this stage whether a refund on that would be applicable. I would imagine so. However, obviously apply for the ITAC permit if you can. The important thing to note there is before you can use that rebate item, the ITAC permit needs to be applied for. We have been engaging with ITAC in terms of questions around the application form, and various practical things around that permit. As I say, it was only published on Saturday. So like with all the other things that Dwayne was talking about, it is a bit of a moving target in terms of practically how to use it and access it. Something that a lot of people, or maybe there are even people attending this webinar who are concerned about the cigarettes not being included in essential goods. I believe there are high-level discussions around that, but right now you are not going to be able to bring in cigarettes free of duty and VAT. In case anybody was wondering about that, they are not considered essential goods. Then there was a question earlier about those essential goods, where you find them. They are in the regulations to the Disaster Management Act. That is an act that we have had in place for a long time, and the regulations have been published almost daily since South Africa, or since the crisis was declared a disaster and now a state of emergency. So there are now there have been three different versions of the list of goods. And yeah, you will find it there. You will find the updated list. We can obviously circulate those documents at another time. Okay, just moving on to just go through those goods. Okay, so goods category, food. I think that's fairly self-explanatory. Something that wasn't included initially was animal food. So now it's all food products and non-alcoholic beverages. So things like bottled water. That was one of the initial products listed. Now it's all non-alcoholic beverages. Then cleaning and hygiene products, again, I'm sure a sigh of relief from everybody. Toilet paper is obviously included there. Then sanitary pads, tampons, condoms, the hand sanitizer, disinfectant, soap, alcohol for industrial use and household cleaning products. So just around the alcohol, I will talk about how customs are providing relief on the excise duty that is normally applicable on alcohol. So it's denatured and undenatured ethyl alcohol that is used for disinfectants and hand sanitizer. That is now included in this list. Okay. Then also the personal protective equipment. So that's things like the face masks, gloves, all those kind of things. Like Dwayne said, initially nappies or diapers were not included in the products or as one of the essential goods. They've now expanded that category. So it now includes products for the care of babies and toddlers. So that would necessarily cover things like baby formula as well. Then personal toiletries are included. That underpins the need for additional hygiene at this time as a way of fighting the virus. So hair products, body face washes, roll-ons, deodorants, toothpaste. I have heard that in some of the retail stores, some of that stuff has been blocked off. It can't be supplied, but it is an essential good in terms of this regulation. Then just medical, hospital supplies, and then which matches the personal protective equipment or medical equipment. So test kits, ventilators, all that kind of thing must come in free of duty and free of VAT. Some of those things would have already been free of customs duty, but now it's the VAT as well on import. Then fuel, petrol and diesel, coal and gas, obviously those are essential goods, and then things like airtime and electricity. Something about the supply chain, the goods category. So Dwayne was using the paint example that you can't just supply goods without a label. So some of the things that are used in the production of food products, packaging, raw materials for cleaning and hygiene products, and things like chemicals as well, if you need that in any medical product. So again, this list is very, very important. Something that's interesting about this list is from a purely customs perspective, tariff classification is always something we worry about here. So it's not as if there's one tariff heading per essential product on this list. There could be a number of tariff headings. Now, initially when ITAC said you need to apply for a permit if you want to bring it in free of duty and VAT, there was no list of tariff headings. On a global level, so the World Customs Organization level, they did publish a list of indicative tariff headings, but that's only to a certain level when classifying goods in South Africa. As of today, ITAC have put a list of tariff headings on their site. It's not complete. We've already noticed goods that are missing from there or items that are missing from there. So you will just have to watch that space and just keep very close to the process in order to make sure that you're bringing in goods under the right tariff classification to then get this relief if they are essential goods. Okay, so I mentioned the denatured or undenatured ethyl alcohol to make sanitizer. What has happened again, you would have seen from media reports, some of the alcohol manufacturers, I know SAB was donating a whole lot of alcohol to be used to make hand sanitizers. I know there are gin manufacturers who are now making hand sanitizers. So where it's going to be used to make a sanitizer or a disinfectant, so a disinfectant product, not just a hand sanitizer, you can get relief from the excise duty, but registration is required. Now, I mentioned before about the so-called back office function of customs. So one of those things is registration and licensing. Now, that has basically been put on hold until the end of the lockdown, except for this. So registration and licensing to be able to make or to handle this alcohol and make the sanitizer is going to be available. And there's a process that you would need to follow to register and license. Okay, I do see there are unread messages. I'm not going to respond to any of those yet. I will have a look at those at the end, or we will collate them later. Okay, so something else. I've now spoken about imports of essential goods. I've spoken about some of the manufacturing activities that might attract excise duty, where there'll be relief. I've spoken about how ITAC, and what I did fail to mention was ITAC is the International Trade Administration Commission. So how ITAC are trying to control those imports and permits and so on. Something else that is now happening is export control. So ITAC is in charge of export control. They've always been in charge of export control, and now they are going to enforce it on the export of essential goods. So as a starting point, why would that be? That would be because the world over needs things like face masks. And you could have a customer in, say, Europe who is prepared to pay triple what you normally supply a face mask for if you can export a face mask. But we already know we're running low, or we've run out in many hospitals. So therefore, we need to prevent goods that we need locally from leaving South Africa. And that is why they said they're going to require a permit to be applied for. And I guess that, or our view at this stage is you're actually not going to get that permit. So you'll put in the application and it will be denied because we need all these products here in South Africa. It may be that, or in days to come, that we actually have enough hydroxychloroquine, for example, or some of those medicaments, and therefore they would give you a permit, but limit it to a very specific volume of goods that you can export. Okay, I'm going to move on now. Okay, so customs processes. This is not just clearing goods for import and export, but these are all the things that happen at head office and branch office to keep you trading as an importer, to keep your client trading as an importer and exporter, registration and those kind of things. So we'll just go through some of that. Just letting the slide load. Okay, so SARS Customs has actually been very communicative. So they are putting a lot of the letters on the SARS website. So maybe as a first point, you need to spend time on that website. On the landing page is a tab that says COVID-19. And if you click on that, you will see a lot of letters and publications and media statements and so on from SARS. The customs ones are also included there. Where they haven't been included, they are sending to certain stakeholders. So, for example, I do represent site at the SARS National Customs Stakeholders Forum, and they are sending me letters and things on an almost daily basis to inform all stakeholders. So all goods coming in will be cleared by customs. They will not only process essential goods. And this, as Dwayne mentioned earlier, has been a topic of debate for a while. The one thing they are asking is please communicate with SARS using digital channels, e-filing, email, and so on. They don't want people visiting the branches. They don't want you visiting the offices. They want staff to respond remotely, and by and large, people are working from home. Okay, the biggest letter they've sent has covered the service at the customs offices, what they are doing with registration, licensing, and accreditation, then some of the physical inspections and applications for things like degrouping of containers and consignments for removal and bond. I'll just go into that in a little bit more detail. Okay, so the branches, they know that certain things have to be done in person. So processing of origin certificates. So for example, if you want to bring in a product at a preferential rate of duty, so usually a lower rate of duty, you need a certificate confirming that that product is, for example, a product of an EU member country. And for that, you have to go into the office. For that procedure, they've said it needs to be by appointment only. You do not just arrive. There is an email address that you must email. You must give the information so that they're ready for you to prevent repeat visits. And you must keep to your scheduled appointment time. It goes without saying that all these visits will be subject to strict hygiene control as well. And you'll see that in the last line, social distancing requirements and so on. Okay, so registration, like I said, so an example is maybe carbon tax. It is actually a licensing function, but let's just call it carbon tax registration. All those sort of things, all the normal registrations, say you want to register as a rebate user, all the additions to your current registration, or you just want to register as an importer because you're just bringing in just normal products, non-essential products, that is on hold. Registration that's not on hold is if you want to register to import for the first time one of the essential products that has been listed above. They will make provision for that. Again, like I said, with the licensing, it's on hold, it's postponed, except for licensing for rebate manufacturing of essential goods like sanitizers. So if you've been making gin or making something else, and now you are going to make a sanitizer, you need to license because it is an excisable product, the ethyl alcohol, and therefore they will allow you to do that, and they will assist you with that. Okay, sorry, the next slide's just taking a bit long. I'm not sure why. Okay, accreditation. So accreditation at the moment is something called preferred trader. So it just means that compliance extra compliance importers and exporters can then be accredited as in terms of certain levels, so preferred trader, and you get things like less detentions, and get a dedicated SARS customs person to help you, all that kind of thing. And at the moment, that is going to be postponed. Then just going down to the physical inspections, sometimes that has to happen where product is detained, for example, because it needs a permit from Port Health or State Vet or something like that. Now, some of those, or it looks like at this stage, most of them will continue. We anticipate a delay in some of those inspections because we do believe that there may be fewer officers available, that with the extra hygiene and sanitation of some of the public spaces, it may cause a delay. Okay, so as we said before, there is an updated list of contact details for the various officers, and you need to go and look at that SARS coronavirus page. I shared the link earlier, and I have also explained how to get there. We have found, like I said, that people are very responsive at SARS. There is a general feeling that from the president down all the way to SARS as a government department, that everyone needs to work together. So we are finding almost unprecedented levels of responsiveness from SARS customs. Okay, moving on, letting it load. Okay, so there is a customs command center. Please use that where you don't get a response for the other email addresses. I haven't tried it yet myself because, like I say, we have found that everyone is very responsive, but there it is. You have a number and you have an email address. So at least you have a starting point if you're really not being assisted. There was a repeat question earlier about a client, I think in a controversy matter. I would suggest I know that's a customs email address, but if you really are not getting any response, nothing stops you from trying on that one. Okay, then ITAC. So we mentioned earlier you will need a permit to bring in the essential goods if you want to bring them in without duty and VAT. You will also need to contact ITAC if you wish to remove any of those goods from the country and send them elsewhere. So ITAC are actually closed, but you can contact them for those specific permits. We have been in contact with them today, and they were responsive. So they are working, but they're closed for a lot of the normal things that happen with ITAC, like duty rebate applications, APDP, so that's the auto industry program. So normal processing for that is actually closed. Okay, so impact on world trade, maybe just in terms of actually moving goods, the transport regulations. Obviously, there's no passenger traffic, no passengers allowed. Air cargo is being allowed. Rail transport, there needs to be extra hygiene, and there is cross-border movement. We have already seen a lot of that. Then with public transport, again, there's been quite a lot made of the rules around that. Some of them have been relaxed, some of them more details have been provided, but there needs to be extra hygiene measures in place. Then there was a clarifying announcement by the Minister of Transport. Again, we said earlier that there was confusion. Can we only import and export essential goods? Can we put other things in the container? Is it going to be a case of, well, if I can only put hand sanitizer in the container, well, then I'm just not going to import it because it's not worth my while. So all those questions have arisen, and a lot of it is now being clarified as of Saturday, that all cargo can move and not only essential goods. Okay, so the international airports, initially Cape Town was left off. You can see there Cape Town has been included. a lot of hygiene regulations, especially from the medium and high-risk countries. That is a whole separate list that I also believe has been changed quite a lot. So some of the countries have moved from low to medium, medium to high, and so on. And a lot of that cargo is then subject to that. Again, like I said, there was very confusing messaging in terms of what goods can be imported or not. There was this letter on the 25th of March, and the whole idea, and I'm going to just move to the next slide as well so that you can see the rest of the letter, because it does go over. Okay, SARS can conduct physical inspections. SARS can clear all the goods. They are asking that for people to consider only importing essential goods if possible. Only submit declarations for goods that you have to submit. Practically, that doesn't, or commercially, I don't know how that makes sense for some of the reasons we explained earlier. But SARS are saying they will clear everything. The big question arises in terms of what happens post-clearance. How difficult is it going to be to move goods from Tambo or from Dubai Trade Port or wherever it is in the country post-clearance? Will there be delays there? Will the container depots get too full? Those are the problems. So SARS customs are only responsible up until the point of clearance. After that, it becomes a wider question for, I suppose, the Department of Transport. But SARS customs will clear all goods. Okay, that is the end of the formal presentation. I'm trying to see if I can answer some of your questions at this stage. Okay, unfortunately, the questions are not visible to me. So I think I'm going to hand over to Karen at this stage. However, I will be available during the Q&A time, which is, I think, 16:40 to 5 p.m. And obviously ready to answer anything, and then also very happy to circulate a lot of those documents we've spoken about. They are extensive. There are lots of versions, so it's very important, like we said earlier, that you are making decisions and advising on the correct set of information.
Ladies and gentlemen, as part of this webinar, we also thought it a good idea to provide you with a high-level summary of specific guidance and guides that are going around at the moment related to COVID-19. So our aim is to provide you with a high-level overview of the sources of information and the basic relief proposed. And then we've made short summary recordings on each of these. So you're welcome to have a look at our YouTube channel, where we've made summary recordings where we unpack these issues in more detail, giving you guidance related to the process to be followed, the documents to be provided and submitted, etc. So if anything is of a particular interest to you, we do suggest that you have a look at those recordings as well. So we'll be unpacking firstly the SMME emergency funding package, then the notice on compensation for occupationally acquired coronavirus disease under the COVID Act. Then we'd be looking at the benefits in terms of UIF. We'd also look at the Tax Admin Act and how that impacts us in terms of still maintaining our compliance status and what to do if we're non-compliant. And then lastly, the other relief mechanisms suggested. We must just mention that we're still waiting for detailed SARS guidance in the form of a practice note or a guide. When we receive the guidance, we will definitely make some more recordings available to you, where we'll be unpacking the consequences and the process to be followed. But at this stage, when the webinar is put together, this is the information that we have available. So firstly, looking at the SMME emergency funding package, I'd just like to mention to you also that we have a webinar scheduled for the 2nd of April that will be unpacking the relief provided by government in a lot of detail. So if you're interested in this, you can have a look at the recording on our YouTube channel in the meantime, and then please join us for this webinar, which will definitely be an interesting one. So for you to be an SMME, of course, there's specific criteria that you need to adhere to in terms of the number of employees and also the level of turnover. But the requirement for the facility, the relief that is provided, you need to be a business or a company that is 100% owned by South African citizens. The employees must be 70% South Africans. Priority, the guide says, will be given to businesses owned by women, the youth, and people with disabilities. These businesses must be registered and compliant taxpayers and must be UIF compliant. Now, the process they want you to follow, they're keeping as simple as possible. They want you to register online at this email address, smmesa.gov.za. It's a simple application form, but then there's a whole list of documentary proof that needs to be provided. So after you've applied, you've registered, you then need to send in the documentary proof together with your reference number. Now, there are 3 packages provided for. The first package provided for is the Business Growth Facility. Now, the rationale behind this is that various businesses are involved in the production or supply of healthcare-related products that will be utilized in the combat and spread of COVID-19. And then there's also some products that need to be produced or manufactured or supplied that are part of the essential goods list. Right? So these businesses need to be supported. And the rationale is that there's short-term support during this period, but that would lead to long-term growth and would hopefully give them the opportunity to produce and strengthen their place in the market via long-term contracts and growth past and post the COVID-19 pandemic. So this provides relief in terms of working capital, only direct costs, stock bridging finance, purchase order finance, and capital equipment finance. And financing is provided at prime less 5%. So the term and the type of finance will be based on the needs of the business, right? And that's why all the supporting documents need to be provided and will be analyzed and assessed. So that's the first package. The second package is SMME Relief Finance, and this is provided to SMMEs that will experience severe reduction in demand and therefore reduction in revenues due to COVID-19. So it's important from government's perspective that these SMMEs don't close down completely, that they're supported with working capital and that jobs are retained. So this is soft loan funding that will be provided for a 6-month period from April 2020. It's limited to April 2020. It's limited to 500,000 Rand per SMME, dependent on the requirements of the business and the cash flow projections, and the funding will be provided at prime less 5%. Right, again, only for direct costs that are auditable. And then the third package is restructuring of funded SMMEs. So this is now payment holidays in terms of capital and or interest restructuring for a maximum period of 6 months for already funded SMMEs to provide relief to them. If there's additional funding necessary, that will be provided at prime less 5% once again. All right, so this is to assist and to provide relief to SMMEs. The second aspect that we need to consider is the COVID notice, right? So in terms of getting this disease, if you were exposed to this disease whilst on a business trip and traveling to a country or an area of high risk, or there's a presumed high-risk work environment where the transmission of COVID-19 is inherently prevalent, you can have a look at the COID notice. Now, it became effective immediately. It was issued on the 20th of March 2020. It also provides us with an ICD-10 code for COVID-19, and that's the U07*01. What is important is that you need to provide proof that there's chronological sequence between the exposure at work via the business trip or the high-risk work environment and the development of symptoms. There's a whole long list of documentary proof that needs to be provided. Some of it needs to be completed by medical practitioners, some of it by the employer, but you need to provide the documentary proof in order to then apply for the relief in terms of the COID notice. So the exposure risk categories specifically provided for, we have very high risk and high exposure risk. That will typically be medical staff, personnel involved in taking care of COVID-19 patients that are known to be infected or suspected to be infected. It's also lab personnel and mortuary workers. So that's your very high risk and high risk. Your medium exposure risk is for those who have frequent or close contact with people who may be infected, but who are not known or suspected to be infected. So that's within 2 meters of these persons. Typical examples would be schools and high population density work environments, and then your low risk would be all the others. There are various benefits provided for. We have temporary total disablement, we've got permanent disablement, we've got medical aid, and then death benefit. So we unpack all of these in our recording, and then we also have 2 webinars that will touch on these aspects on the 2nd of April and on the 6th of April. You're welcome to join us for that. Then moving over to UIF benefits. Very, very important to make use of this. Various benefits are specifically being provided for. We have a recording on this, and then we've got a dedicated webinar on the 6th of April unpacking all of these consequences, and then also the impact for the employer and the impact for the employee. It's important to know what your rights are. Now, in terms of benefits being provided for, firstly, we have the natural disaster benefit. So the employer might decide as a result of COVID-19 to close its business and to send employees home. And the business might be forced to do that during this national lockdown. So this is deemed to be a temporary layoff. And if the employer cannot pay employees for this period, the employer can then apply for the natural disaster benefit. Important to note, the employer should apply. You cannot claim the natural disaster benefit with the normal UIF benefit, so it's either the one or the other, and the value is capped at 3,500 Rand per employee, equal to the minimum wage. The term of the benefit is the shorter of the period of the shutdown or a maximum period of 3 months. Thereafter, normal UIF principles would be applicable. So that's the first benefit. Of course, there are various documents to be submitted. The second benefit is the reduced work time benefit, and that is when a company shuts down for a certain period or implements reduced work time. Benefit payable is a difference between what the employer pays and the normal UIF benefit that will be payable should the employee lose employment. And again, various documents to submit together with the application. Third benefit is the illness benefit. That is if the employee is quarantined for 14 days. Now, what's interesting is that you don't need a doctor's letter. Typically, you need some sort of medical certificate. But now the employee can self-quarantine, right, for 14 days. You don't need the declaration from the medical practitioner. You need a confirmation letter, which is a declaration signed by an employer that is downloadable, and also a declaration signed by the employee. And both parties therefore need to agree to the 14 days special leave. If it exceeds 14 days, then you need a medical certificate from a medical practitioner. Right, so that's your third benefit. And then lastly, death benefit. So this is a benefit paid to a beneficiary of the deceased. Persons that are eligible to apply would be a spouse, life partner, children, and nominated persons of the deceased. The process to apply, you can apply online at uFiling, and in terms of the documentary proof, there are various UIF processing centres that have been identified and a list that has been provided where the documentary proof needs to be submitted to. Now moving over to the Tax Admin Act. Now, when we talk about the Tax Admin Act, there are various penalties imposed for non-compliance. The first is a fixed amount penalty, and that is based on the taxable income of the preceding year of assessment. It's a monthly penalty ranging between 250 Rand and 16,000 Rand. And that is, for example, for non-submission of a return or late submission. So you cannot use COVID-19 as an excuse for not submitting. You still need to be compliant, right? If you're not compliant, the penalty will be imposed, the fixed amount penalty. There's also a percentage-based penalty that could be imposed for late payment, and that is a 10% penalty in the case of late payment of provisional tax, of VAT, and employees' tax. Now, the administrative non-compliance penalties can be remitted. If it's imposed for a failure to register, or it's a nominal or first incidence, or there's an exceptional circumstance, or it was incorrectly imposed. So the question is, can a taxpayer argue that COVID-19 is deemed to be an exceptional circumstance and therefore the penalty should be remitted? Now, the Tax Admin Act deems an exceptional circumstance to have rendered the taxpayer incapable of complying with the obligation imposed. Specific circumstances are listed as being exceptional. The first of which is external factors, if there was a natural or human-made disaster, a civil disturbance, or a disruption in services. Now, there's definitely scope to argue that COVID-19 and the national shutdown and the national disaster that has been declared could be deemed exceptional in terms of this first category. The onus is on the taxpayer to prove that this has rendered the taxpayer incapable of complying with obligation. Just remember the onus. The second option is to look at factors personal to the taxpayer. So if the non-compliance was due to serious illness or accident or serious emotional or mental distress. So if you're dealing with a sole proprietor who has fallen ill due to COVID-19, you could make use of the second category. Third one is also an option, serious financial hardship. For an individual, if compliance would lead to depriving the person of basic living requirements, or then in the case of a business, if there was an immediate danger that the continuity of business operations and the continued employment of the employees would be jeopardized. And this is definitely something else that you can consider. So if you can prove that this has rendered the taxpayer incapable of complying with obligation, that's definitely an argument that can be made. The fourth category is an act by SARS if it's connected to SARS's fault or error, and then any other circumstance that could be relevant. So there's definitely room to argue that this is deemed to be exceptional circumstances, and therefore the penalty should be remitted based on that. The process to be followed, it's not done automatically. You need to do a request for remittance RFR on e-filing with a description of the circumstances which prevented the taxpayer from complying, and together with supporting documentation. If SARS disallows, you can object against the SARS decision. Please remember, ladies and gentlemen, you can also apply for installment payment arrangements in terms of the Tax Admin Act, or compromise of tax debts. So these are also options available. So please make use of the relief mechanisms that are provided to you in the Tax Admin Act, but don't use COVID-19 as an excuse to not be compliant. Right, so you need to ensure that you're making use of these relief mechanisms where they are available to you and where you meet the requirements. Then when we talk about the other relief mechanisms that have been suggested, and this is where we need some more information and we're still waiting for that. The first suggestion was that tax compliant businesses with a turnover of less than 50 million be allowed to delay 20% of their pay-as-you-earn liabilities over the next 4 months and a portion of their provisional corporate income tax payments without penalties and interest over the next 6 months. We still need some more information on that, but that's definitely a valuable relief mechanism that we can make use of. Secondly, SARS will also pay out ETI reimbursements every month instead of twice a year at the end of every reconciliation period. Thirdly, tax subsidy of up to 500 Rand per person in the next 4 months for those employees earning below 6,500 Rand in the private sector. Then also there was mention made that the temporary reduction of the employer and employee contributions to UIF and also the skills development fund are being considered. We don't yet know what that will involve. And then lastly, commercial banks have been exempted from the provisions of the Competition Act. So we've seen most of the biggest commercial banks giving relief through to their clients, especially small businesses, in terms of payment holidays, reduced fees, etc. So this is where we stand at the moment. It's not all bad. There are definitely avenues that you can pursue to provide relief. I'd just like to again remind you that we've made recordings of all of these aspects. So if you want more information, you can have a look at our YouTube channel. And then also please join us for the upcoming webinars where we'll be unpacking all of these aspects in much more detail. If you have practical questions, ladies and gentlemen, and many questions have come through to our hotline, we are collating all of these questions and we will be giving all of them through to the subject matter experts who will be taking you through these aspects in the upcoming free webinars. So please join us for these webinars. If you have a burning question that you've sent in, we'll be answering your questions in these upcoming webinars.
Their document, and that will be circulated, so you can keep putting your questions there. They will go into a document. Dwayne and I and Karen will answer that, and that will be circulated. But unfortunately, there are too many questions for us to answer them live right now. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Bye.